Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Leah and I make free-based content here on YouTube. I release new videos every single Tuesday. If you're new, welcome. I hope this blesses you and you continue with us. Do subscribe if you find this, a blessing to you. And if you're coming back, welcome back. Hope you're having an amazing week so far. Hope you're having an amazing September so far. We are in the middle of a series talking about understanding the principles of seasons. This is quite important because if you don't know what time it is, then you don't know what to do. And if you don't know what time it is, you also don't know who to do it with. And we are learning how from nature, just like in the natural, there's different cycles of the year. Like why spiritually speaking, there's different cycles of our spiritual walk with the Father. And it's important for us to learn from nature because they're pretty much a parallel in a sense. What marks winter, naturally speaking, also marks winter, spiritually speaking. Last week we spoke about spring, and today we're going to be speaking about summer seasons of our lives. Let's read in Ecclesiastes. It says, "To everything there is a season and a time for every matter or purpose under earth." The marks of summer. When we look at it in the natural, it's a time when things finally seem to come alive. It's a time when the first initial harvest is seen. It's a time when we actually increase activity, and it's also a time of increased heat, which can be great but also dangerous in a sense, because if we don't know how to hydrate properly, if we don't know how to navigate activity and being still, we can get lost in the hyperactivity of the season. It's also the time to balance work and play. From a spiritual perspective, we look at it, this is the time when we finally start to experience the fruit of the work we've been doing in the unseen during the winter, during the spring. It's also a time for us to continue watering our seeds, watering the seeds in the unseen, because it is the initial states of harvest. It is not a time for full harvest. So we don't start relaxing and just enjoy. Yes, there's fruit that's coming about, but the fruit is still not fully matured, both spiritually and naturally speaking. So we still need to water the seeds. We still need to be diligent in the unseen. We still need to be wise. It's also a time when we start to learn the balancing act of rest, work, and enjoying the fruits that God is beginning to immerse in our life. It's a time when we start to fully embrace the calling of our lives. It's also a time when there's greater clarity of what God has actually intended us for the season that we're going into, and also our life mission, our life assignment, because we each have an assignment on our life, and that assignment is outworked through seasons. The purpose of summer, in a sense, it's a time of revelation of a deeper, as I said, a deeper clarity of your assignment. It's a time of a deeper relationship with the Father. It's a time of an awareness of exactly why did you go through the winter that you've just gone through, the cycle that God has been taking you into. What was the purpose of it? That's when all these things come to clarity. How then do we steward or navigate summer? One of the best people that I would definitely encourage you to study, especially when it comes to learning how God takes us through seasons in terms of our journey with Him, is David. Because Joseph, yes, is great, but I feel like David, more than any other person in the Bible, we see all the different seasons fully outplayed, and his emotional journey, not just his spiritual journey, but his emotional journey in those seasons, how he handled them, the people he had around him. And let's read in 2 Samuel. It says, "Then all the tribes of Israel went to David at Hebron and told him, 'We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, when Saul was our king, you were the one who really led the forces of Israel. And the Lord told you, you will be the shepherd of my people Israel. You will be Israel's leader.' So there at Hebron, King David made a covenant before the Lord with all the elders of Israel, and they anointed him king of Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in all. He had reigned over Judah from Hebron for 7 years and 6 months, and from Jerusalem he reigned over all Israel and Judah for 33 years. Backstory, if in case you don't know. David, in his teenagers, it's believed he was 17 years old. He gets anointed as king. Get this. He gets anointed as king. There's still another king in place. But God anoints him. He doesn't necessarily commission and appoint him at that time and season, which is key for us to understand that sometimes God anoints us, but there's still a time for us to be anointed and commissioned. So he gets anointed at 70. There's still this king who's still in place. So David had to be wise with, okay, I've received this promise from God, but there's still someone in the place that I'm told that I'm going to be there. So what do I do? David, in that season of being unknown, still being in the wilderness, still being a shepherd boy, was still diligent with what God had placed in his hand, which was to be a shepherd for his father. He was still diligent with the gifts that God gave him, which was his music, which actually ushered and opened the door and opportunity for him to actually initially get into the palace. And also at the same time, he had to navigate with this king who clearly noticed that this is the one that God will replace me with. So he had to deal with a leader who still had jealousy, who still had bitterness towards him, because he could see that this is my replacement. And instead of actually being a father and training him and preparing, in all of this, David had to protect his heart. Remember, in the winter season, we need to protect our hearts against whoever and whatever goes on or whatever happens to us that God allows to happen, because there's a purpose and reason. And the important thing for us to understand is that Saul became king instantly. He never went through a wilderness season. He never went through a cycle of seasons of God outworking his purpose. And look at what mistakes he did. And I feel like God was like, I'm not doing that again. So with the next king, I'm taking him through a process. And this is when you see all throughout First Samuel, all the way to Second Chronicles, we see the journey that God took. One might say that David did more mistakes than Saul. But even though David did a lot more mistakes than Saul, David always had a tender heart to God. And he always kept God as the prize, not the promise. So from David's journey, we see in this scripture that I just read that finally, after so many years of God's promises, that's why I needed to tell, he was 17 and now he's 30. And this is only then they come. So in that time, he was only leading half of the kingdom. God had told him he's going to lead the whole kingdom. So finally, these very people that had rejected him, these very people that insulted him, are coming to beg him to be that king. Notice. And not only that, but David could have easily been content with the 7 that accepted him. Judah accepted him from the day one. He could have just been content, but he wasn't. So the first principle of us, because summer is the initial stages of harvest, the first lesson we learn is be diligent. Don't get comfortable with the initial fruit. David had to not only settle for half of a kingdom, but still be diligent in the unseen to train in his being a warrior. Because you're going to say, I'm a warrior, I've earned my stripes, everyone knows that I'm a man of war and I win. But he had to still be diligent in practicing his hand for battle. He still had to be diligent in his cultivating a relationship with the Father. He still needed to be diligent in keeping the main thing, which was God. He prayed that God teach me your precepts. He prayed, God teach me your ways. And that is why throughout the different stages that he went through, even when he started experiencing the first initial stages of his harvest, his heart was still for God, for God's face, for God's heart, for God's mind, not just his promises, which was the opposite of Saul. Saul started being fake humble, yet at the end, he cared more what people thought about him than what God thought about him. So this is a stage we need to be careful that we still keep the main thing, which is our Father. Secondly, guard your heart. And I repeat this because this is a stage where God begins to vindicate you. This is the stage where God begins to promote you, and all the people that your naysayers, all the people that mistreated you, all the people that left you in your winter may begin to emerge. And this is where God tests you. Before he gives you the full harvest, he wants to see, can you actually handle glory? Can you actually handle promotion? As I alluded, David, the same people that rejected him in a different season of his life are the very people that are coming to him now saying, lead us. He was called to serve them, but they didn't want him. But now when they see they actually need him, they're coming to him. Not only that, but David understood God's timing. As I said, there was still already Saul. David never ran ahead of God. David understood that it is God's way. God is the one who's called me, so he's the one who will place me at the right time. And therefore, he's the one who will remove in his way the person who is actually still sitting in the place that I'm called to. And when that happened, it was evident to everyone that this is God. This is not David. David did not usurp power in a sense. It was given from above. And that's why no matter what, God's hand was always on him, because David understood timing. David allowed God to do things his way, and also David protected his heart. And there's a story in 2 Samuel where we see this guy called Shimei. And in that time, David's son was trying to fight the throne from David, was trying to take the throne away from David. And David, look at David's heart. Instead of subjecting Israel to a civil war, he chose to leave. And it says that he went into the wilderness. And David was not a stranger to the wilderness. So you and I sometimes, we will be tested. Will we put our interests ahead of everyone else? Or will we still be humble enough, even when we're attacked by the people we least expect, to put the people that God has entrusted to us ahead, above our own interests, and trust God to vindicate us? And there's a person who was insulting him. When God dealt with Absalom, come back and say, oh yeah, you know what I did, you know what I was saying, forget that, forgive me, begging for mercy. And David still forgave him. So from Shimei and the people of Israel, we learned that people are as faithful as their options, but guard your heart. Don't treat them accordingly as they deserve. Treat them according to who God has made and shaped you to be. And third is, don't settle. David was leading half a kingdom when God promised him the full kingdom. He could have easily settled. Don't settle in your first initial stages of the promise coming to fruition. Keep an open heart and keep an open mind to God. Always have the things that God gives you with an open hand. Always hold them with an open hand, because God can take them away. And oftentimes when God takes something away, He's testing your heart that, am I still the one? Am I still your treasure? Or is what I've given you now become your treasure? Or he's taking it away to give you something even better that he didn't tell you. He first needed to test your heart. And because you handled the first promise well, then he can trust you with a bigger one. Don't settle. When you start seeing the first fruits, just remember, don't get stuck in Hebron where David was when God has promised you the whole of Jerusalem. That is how we steward and handle summer. Summer is a beautiful time, but it's also a dangerous time, because it is a time where people either start to become proud because they're starting to experience the first initial stages of the promise, or they settle and they think this is it. And God has like, no, I promise you this. So don't settle in your summer, and continue to guard your heart. And I leave you with a story that personally I must confess, I never actually noticed it until I just read it this past week. And that is Job. In Job 42, it says, when Job prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes. In fact, the Lord gave him twice as much as before. In our winter seasons, we'll experience persecution. We will experience abandonment. But however, part of the restoration of God is for us to actually pray. Could it be that God is, you are holding your promise, you are holding your harvest because you have not forgiven someone who mistreated you in your winter, who abandoned you in your winter? Only when we always say, oh, God gave Job twice as much. But it says only after he prayed for his friends. The very ones that accused him, the very ones that hurt him, the very ones that somewhat abandoned him. When he prayed for them, God restored. So I leave you with this thought. Check your heart. Is anything or anyone still locking you into your past season of winter? And next week, we'll be closing the series with fall/autumn, depending on the hemisphere that you live in. Have a good one. Love you as always. I pray for you. Please do continue to pray for me always. I really, really appreciate your prayers. And I pray for you as well. Have an amazing one. Bye.